Willow of Good. You know him? Damn, wish I knew him. I bring him to the king, like the proclamation said, me fortune be made. The young Daikini grinned shyly, as though amazed at his own presumption. Get a post into the Red Lions. Those were the king's household guard, culled from the best troops in royal service, and said to be the finest in all the world. What's the king want with this Willow? Thorn asked. Don't you know nothing? The Ascension. This is the celebration of the sacred Princess Elora's 13th birthday. A year of life for each of the great domains. He's her godfather and all, ain't he? Willow saved her from the dark forces. He destroyed the demon queen Bavmorda. He has to be there. Oh, was what Thorn said. Then, in some amazement of his own, I'd forgotten. The answer plain as daylight, as impossible to actually see. He could hear the brownies laughing and couldn't fault them for it. He should have known. The king appears to be going to a lot of trouble, Thorn said then. That's gospel. Ain't been no celebration like it since the world began, so it's said. Be a sight to behold, all right. Your lucky day then, trooper, Mulroon interjected. You're out of Bandicoot garrison, you say? The young man nodded. Be just as easy and a lot quicker to take you all the way down to the bay, transfer you to another packet boat that'll take you where you're needful to go. No one will hold it against you for staking yourself to a couple of days' stopover in Anguin, since it's right along the way. You can travel with me as far as Maragway, then I'll pass you on to a captain I trust. His tone made his dismissal plain. Jaren took the hint and gathered his gear, looking around for somewhere to go. Mulroon called to one of his mates. See the lad settled up? Show him the galley in the head. Be off, lad. Make yourself comfortable. Jaren hurried after the mate. Bit brusque with the trooper, weren't you? Thorn wondered a while later in Mulroon's cabin. Me nature, don't you know? I was hoping you'd take us the whole way, Jasso. The big man poured himself a mug of steaming tea from a flask on his desk. In return, Thorn rummaged about in the pouch until he came up with the remains of a sandwich. He broke off a chunk for Mulroon, smaller ones for Frangine and Rule, kept what was left for himself. You're in a rare mood, Drumheller. What's that supposed to mean? No more'n what it says. Don't think I've seen such a humor in you since, hell, I think it was when we first met. 12 years and more. Near enough. How so, Jasso? You're alive, bucko, top to bottom, in and out. There's a sparkle to your eyes and a passion about you. I tell you true, Thorn Drumheller, that's a sight worth the wait for it. Oh, stop. I'm talking serious, man. Knowing you since the cataclysm, been like walking with a ghost. Never seen anyone build so strong and high a wall about themselves. Course, ain't seen anyone in such pain, neither. Nor fear. It was healing the trooper's horse. Smashed that wall, Jasso. I don't think I ever used so much power before. Fair bargain strikes me. You heal the sick, and yourself all at a go. Sorsha and Matt Mardigan were my dearest friends. There should have been a way to save them. Mayhap was, but you didn't know it is all. No crime in that, Drumheller, not even shame. Be part of the world, Thorn, or find one more suited. Your living friends need you whole. Oh, go on. There's a scent to the air, Drumheller. A taint to the rivers where they touch Anguin Bay. Trouble's coming. Those damnable hounds are part of it. Everyone with a bit of awareness can sense it. All this damn babble about Elora Danon. Mulroon smiled mirthlessly. Have you no faith in the sacred princess? She's a girl, nothing more. Spent her whole damn life in that tower the king built her in Anguin. Trotted out when it's convenient for state occasions and the like. She may look the part, Drumheller, good and glorious as spun gold, but I wouldn't count on her to see me through a sunset breeze. In all the world, so Jaren told Thorn with pardonable pride, there was no city finer than Anguin. Off the sunset ocean, you passed through King's Gate between a pair of towering headlands and into an expansive bay. 3 great rivers made their terminus there. Gateway to both land and ocean, Angwin was a natural place to trade. There had been established settlements since the dawn of memory, the Daikini being merely the latest race to plant roots and sink foundations. Angwin was where all the elements came together. Named for the ancient fortress of legend, reputedly situated on the headland across the bay, the city on the southern peninsula benefited from easy access from both land and water. The northern peninsula was a wilder setting, where cliffs reared straight up from the water. There were no man-made paths through that wilderness. The folk there, none of them human, liked their privacy and had little interest in the affairs of the hustling, bustling Daikini come lately across the way, which in turn ceded effective control over gate and bay to the sovereign of Angwin, who used that advantage to build a state of unsurpassed wealth and power renowned throughout the Daikini realms. Mulroon placed them in good hands, a blood-kin cousin named Morag, and they had a quick and uneventful journey downriver on a large ocean-capable schooner. But Thorn sensed something was amiss, for he noticed from the moment he came aboard that only a single Wern worked this boat, a young, sleek-furred male named Rin Taxamanyan. And Thorn noted that others of his sea-going kind were increasingly few and far between in the water as they approached the bay. Morag, the schooner's captain, had been a sailor since she was old enough to walk a deck. She knew the bay better than the rooms of her own house, but the absence of the weir, whose natural element was the water, had left her edgy and cautious. "Anyone but Mulroon had asked," she told Thorn. "I'd na ha waited." Sun and sea had textured her skin, which made her emerald eyes gleam all the more brightly. "Myself, Nelwyn, I like a world where things are what they seem." "No less than I, shipmaster." "So where's your girl fall in all this, hey?" she asked him. "She's the stuff of legend. 12 realms, shipmaster, of flesh and spirit, mortal and immortal, all claiming aspects of this life, this globe for their own." Morag thrust her jaw towards the still distant skyline of Angwin. "And yon girl's going to make a difference?" "According to prophecy." Which is fine, assuming that's a contract all the parties feel bound by." He had heard, but he wasn't really listening. His mind was lost in his memories. It was a late night, the eve of the cataclysm, though who was to know it then? The sky was a breathtaking tapestry of stars, and the warm air was leavened by a gentle breeze. The moon was waning as he sat, weary after a day of planting, beneath a shade tree by the house, and glanced up to find the true wizard of the Vale, the High Aldwin, standing before him. "You've not gone to Tir Asleen," the Aldwin said. He meant for Alora Dannon's birthday. "No." "You're godfather to Alora Dannon." "I was husband and father long before." "When you were a farmer, not a wizard." The High Aldwin held up a scrap of cloth. It was frayed all around the edges, like something stripped unfinished from the weaver's loom. As Thorn watched, the threads appeared to tear away, unraveling before his eyes, until all that remained in the Aldwin's hand was empty air. "The fabric of our world no longer holds, young wizard. It wears through. It tears. It ceases to be." What are you saying?" "The farmer has his path, the wizard another. Each offers its joy, each demands a price." "Why are you telling me this? I made my choice." "I know." The Aldwin leaned over to pat his hand. "I just wanted to remind you." With the next night came an explosion in the sky so great that all the village thought the world was done. Thorn knew Tir Asleen was gone, as surely as he knew the fact of his own life. He knew his friends were lost to him, as he knew his family soon would be. The High Aldwin met him at the door. "What's happened?" Thorn said. The Aldwin bowed his head. "I don't know," he confessed. "I was supposed to be there today. I knew the others would understand. I hoped Alora would as well. And I was there. Last night. I was there at Tir Asleen. I thought it was a dream, Thorn said. I rode there on the back of a dragon.
They represent the greatest of powers, dragons do. To see one, that's the greatest of blessings, or of curses.
I have to go, Thorn said. The old Nelwyn nodded. He held out a hand, a belt with 2 fair-sized pouches attached, Thorn's traveling kit, plus a satchel stuffed with clothes.
The longer you tarry, the greater the danger to all you hold most dear.
Tell my family I love them, Thorn had said.
If they remember nothing else about you, young wizard, that will ever remain.
Damn me eyes, Geron said, breaking his reverie. That column of horses along the shore road, are they who I think? Aye, Morag told him. Thunder Riders. Mason. Geron proceeded to show off what he knew. They hail from the plains beyond the stairs to heaven. The stairs to heaven was a phalanx of high, proud peaks, out of which sprang what was said to be the greatest river in the world. In a land of such natural superlatives, it was small wonder the warrior race who claimed it for their birthplace considered none that lived their equals. According to story, Geron continued, they got no proper home. Born on horseback, they live with what they can carry and no more. When the thunder rides, it leaves desolation as its trail, he finished formally. Morag altered course to take the ship further out into the channel before heading for the harbor. She was in no mood to learn the truth of the old saying, the hard way. Once they docked, farewells were brief, and Thorn couldn't help noticing that Morag and her husband Shando and the Wern seemed anxious to leave.
Idiot,
Frangine scolded Thorn.
Better you should ask them to take us along.
I have to see how Alora's turned out, Thorn insisted. Whatever the cause of the islanders' apprehension, there was no evidence of it on the quay at Angwin. The crowd was bustling, and there was a tremendous air of celebratory anticipation. Everywhere Thorn turned, somebody was hawking souvenirs. Wow, was all Geron could say as they made their way through the throng. Take some getting used to, Thorn agreed. Been before, have you? Not here, precisely. But I've seen the like, yes. The way I'm looked at, folks hereabouts must think me a proper bumpkin. Pathfinders are a rare sight this deep in-country, especially carrying their saddles. They're as old and noble a regiment as the Lions, Geron. So you wonder why I've my heart set on t'other? Yes, actually. My granda was a lion. It's a fool's dream, I know, but I thought I could be like him. Perhaps I can help, Thorn said. I'm a Nelwyn. The Magus is a Nelwyn. All you need do is present me at the door. 2 main thoroughfares reached out from the port. The Royal Promenade ran straight to the city's main landward gate, and the high road beyond. Meandering the other way, along the waterfront towards the King's Gate, was the Esplanade, more colloquially referred to as the Rambles, because that was what folk tended to do when the weather was nice, enjoying the spectacular view of the bay. Inland, the highest hill was the King's Mount, of which one of the most impressive features was Elora's eyrie, sanctum sanctorum of the sacred princess. To some a sanctuary, others a prison, said the roadside troubadour who provided them with directions. What do you mean, wretch? Demanded Geron. A cage is a cage, my friend, no matter how gilded. Elora isn't allowed out? Thorn asked. Are you daft, drumheller? Geron cried aghast. She's the sacred princess. Likes of her don't mingle with the likes of us. Ain't right nor proper. The Ascension's the first time she'll be seen by any but the royals and her attendants. I'd move off the road if I were you. I beg your pardon? Mason, Thunder Riders. There were no more than a score of these renowned warriors, but their horses' hooves struck the paving stones like drumheads. They were large-framed men, sable figures with horned helmets on ebony horses, as though carved from jet, and presented a stark contrast to the slim figure who led them. She was a woman, for one, not quite a match for them in height, and certainly not in breadth, but she more than made up for that with the sheer force of her personality. She wore no armor and conveyed the sense that none was needed. She was more than capable of taking care of herself without it. She wore 2 daggers on her belt, plus a sword, and her long, dark hair hung behind her in a braid. "Anna Carey," the troubadour announced to no one in particular. "Princess Royal, heir apparent since the disappearance of her brother. Been a dozen years since the boy vanished and the queen died. Night of the cataclysm it was, same night the sacred princess was dropped smack dab in the middle of the king's courtyard. There's some who call it a changeling switch, the one for the other, and complain Angwin got the worst of the bargain." "How do you mean?" "The sacred princess didn't do much good for Tir Asleen, did she?" Now that the riders had passed, Thorn saw Jaren striding purposefully through the throng toward a trio of red lions resplendent in their scarlet tabards. Jaren turned and called him. "Drumheller!" "I'm glad to see you found friends, Pathfinder Havelhand." "See?" Jaren said triumphantly, an outstretched arm presenting Thorn to the others. "A Nelwyn!" They looked one to the other. They didn't believe. "I am," Thorn told them. "I swear. I believe I can help in your search for the Magus." Another set of looks, and Thorn had a sudden sense of dread that he'd said too much, and all of it wrong.
"Right then,"
one of the lions conceded with a grunt. "Captain'll want to talk with you both." The decision wasn't subject to discussion or resistance. Their captain had been a captain too long, and would remain one until he died. Short on stature, short on wit, he made up for both, with a nose for cheap wine and a belly for bad food.
"Done well, Pathfinder,"
he said to Jaren, who stood at attention.
"I'll be sure to mention it in my report. Leave him in our hands now. We'll see he's taken care of."
"Sir, I thought—"
"Not paid to think, boy. Go."
Jaren went. The captain had fair speed for a man of his bulk. He swept out from behind his desk and rammed Thorn against the wall with a bone-rattling impact.
"Whatever you said to bamboozle that hick won't play here. You're in quicksand, my little man, up to your nose."
He tucked the point of his knife underneath Thorn's jaw and drew blood with a calculated poke. What have I done?" Thorn protested.
"Only one Nelwyn in Angwin, Peck. Only one in the whole world, and that be the Magus. But he warned of an impostor, a blood enemy, he said, of him and the sacred princess."
"Whatever are you talking about?" The captain dug the point in deeper, and blood flowed freely. "Please, I don't understand. Are you talking about Willow Ufgood?"
"The very same, Peck. The Magus wants you alive, and then, unless I'm much mistaken, which I'm not, he wants you damned."
Thorn had been in dungeons before. Didn't like it then, didn't now. The warders had brought their own torches, but bright as they burned, the passage was dominated by a darkness so thick it seemed to swallow the illumination whole.
"Most folks, they've forgotten all about these catacombs,"
the captain chortled.
"Not me, though."
One of the warders held the Nelwyn, while his comrade set to work, clamping the shackles tightly in place. Thorn made no protest. There was no point.
"No more smart-mouth comments, Peck?"
The captain mistook Thorn's silence for fear.
"Got some good news for you. No need to worry about rats or the like coming in the night for a snack. No vermin down here at all is why. Been eaten, you see, by the demon. Stories say these vaults is haunted by a creature so fearsome it'll strip the flesh from your bones and the soul from your body."
With a hollow click, the last fetter snapped closed. Thorn focused on the rapidly fading footsteps with one thought. They're wasting no time clearing out. They truly believe something's down here. The next was the realization that he'd heard no sound of the lock being turned. "Well," Thorn said aloud, just to prove he could both speak and hear.
"Drumheller,"
said Frangine very quietly right beside his ear. "We do not like this place," echoed Rule by the other ear. "Would you pick the lock, please?" Thorn asked. "The manacle's too tight. I can't manage it myself." Rule handled the lock picks while Frangine watched his back. There was a welcome click. As Thorn had suspected, the warders hadn't bolted the door, and while the hall itself was mostly night, his vision was far more effective upstairs than below. Turning for a moment back to the cell, Thorn was struck with the sense that he was looking at an all-encompassing blackness that went on forever. With a shudder, he stepped across the threshold. Near the top of the step, Thorn took a moment to pull a cloak about himself and the brownies. A passive charm, it made him blend with the background. Anyone who saw him from here on would never give him a second thought. As soon as they reached the outer courtyard, they heard a cry. "You, short fella! Up to it!" The man was driving a wagon that was part of a convoy of goods that wound its way from the old keep where the supplies came in to the rear of the palace. Because of the cloak, the man mistook Thorn for a serving boy, so Thorn found himself being delivered right to the palace, which was his destination. He found himself in the staffs section of the palace. The windows weren't as big, nor were there as many. The mason stones were square and solid, lacking the gingerbread carvings that decorated the public facade. Doors led off the loading dock. The driver expertly backed his wagon into place, and Thorn saw servants unrolling huge barrels of wine and beer from another wagon in the next stall over. When the driver turned on his seat to look for him, Thorn stepped behind a page and wrapped his cloak a little more tightly about himself. As far as the driver was concerned, the page was the short fellow who'd ridden up with him. He gave orders, and the boy obeyed. Thorn snaked his way through the press of people and into the hall beyond. Along the way, he snatched himself a royal surcoat and a silver serving tray. He found himself in a kitchen, the likes of which he'd never seen. It stretched the whole width of this wing of the palace. "Who are you, then?" challenged a female voice, and Thorn looked up to see a formidable woman, starched skirts hardly wilting in the ferocious heat. She was covered from collarbone to ankle by an apron, and as she approached, she patted excess flour off her hands. "Sorry, miss," he gabbled. Mean no harm, miss. Here to help." "Cart's there," the cook said to him. "Through that door, down the hall, up the lift. Apologies for this being a cold sup. If she lays a hand on you, youngster, I'll make it good." Who's it for?" "The sacred Princess Alora, of course." Thorn wrestled the cart down the passage he was directed to and emerged into a modest antechamber. As he stood there, the entire room began to rise. "A lift," he murmured delightedly. "Brilliant." "So glad you think so," groused Frangine. "Well, she lives in a tower, my friend. I was wondering how we were supposed to carry this load up to her." As the lift rose, Thorn was slapped hard by a wave of bitter chill. Not the cold of wind and weather. This struck beyond the flesh, a breath of foulness to coat his soul in rime ice.
"Bugger this,"
growled Rule.
"Drumheller, I say we go, and quickly."
The brownies stood back to back, weapons in hand. "A rookery," Thorn said. "Night herons." Herons were for the air what death dogs were on foot, the appearance of something living wrapped around a core of rot. But whereas hounds served because they were born to the role, herons did so because it amused them.
"Hell's teeth,"
hissed Rule.
"Demons in the catacombs,"
was Frangine's contribution.
"Night herons in the tower, a wonderful home the sacred princess has made for herself."
"Considering what happened to her first home, it's not as if she had much choice in the matter," Thorn snapped. Or, he couldn't help adding to himself, friends to stand by her during those awful times. One in particular. "I had grief enough of my own," he told himself. Explanation, perhaps, but no longer acceptable as an excuse. She was better off without me. The lift stopped. A door was opened. He heard footsteps. Last time he'd seen her, she'd barely learned to walk, yet her footsteps were as recognizable as his own. He couldn't help the shy and hopeful smile, or the words that popped out of his mouth. Elora Dannon.
You call this food? She had a plate from the trolley. You call this a decent meal?
Then she threw it at him. The brownies had better reflexes. They ducked. He didn't. She reached for the condiment jars, and he was decorated with a fair-sized helping of mustard. The brownies took full advantage of the situation to make some mischief, gleefully heaving goo back the way it came, placing Elora in a sudden, unexpectedly fierce crossfire that set her back on her heels. Thorn gratefully made a break for cover, only to discover that the impromptu food fight had made the floor murderously treacherous. He squawked as feet first, then the rest of him went flying. Elora responded by upending a silver tureen of cold soup over his head. The brownies came to his defense, peppering Elora with the smelliest pieces of fish and cheese they could grab.
"Guards!" she shrieked. "Vizards! Help me!"
Elora had height on Thorn now, standing half again as tall as he, but she had lost none of her baby fat, and put on more besides. Hers was a face more used to sobs than smiles. From hurts Thorn suspected were generally more imagined than real. Her mouth was cast in a perpetual pout.
"I hate you! I hate you all! Captain of the Guard!"
"Elora, don't!" he protested, wholly in vain as she boxed an ear to shut him up. Anyone else would have received a blow in return, or lesser spell to teach them manners, but he couldn't bring himself to do either. So Frangine, bless him, did it for him. Brownie daggers weren't much longer than rose thorns, but they were much sharper. The thickness of Elora's gown was no protection either, as Frangine's strikes slipped through the layers of finely woven cloth to catch the child full in the backside. Thorn didn't want to leave her, but her screams were sure to attract the attention of her minders. He considered an enchantment to put her to sleep, and cast the events of the past few minutes into the semblance of a dream, but suspected it wouldn't hold on her. Immunity was one of her gifts. Lesser spells rolled off her like water off a duck.
"I'm sorry,"
he said, and then he ran. The brownies led him down so many stairs and around so many corners at such a breakneck pace that he hadn't a clue where he was being led until he burst through a doorway and into a garden, a copse of trees topping a shallow slope. The setting seemed improvised rather than formal, and he knew at once that Elora had designed it herself. He took a step into the open, as quickly ducked back beneath the shelter of the doorway as a great winged shadow swept across the scene. From out another door came Elora, and Thorn actually clutched his heart when the heron dropped down to her. She greeted it with true delight, and it butted its head against her like a true companion. Then both looked toward Thorn's hiding place. One hand raised to point, two mouths opened, two throats uttered an unearthly wail. He hammered open the door behind him and stumbled down another flight of spiral stairs. "Rule! Frangine! Show me the way!"
They cannot help you, Smalley.
The wall ahead was gone, replaced by a darkness that was absolute.
"Drumheller!"
Rule beckoned from the far end of the corridor.
You have little time.
"What are you?"
Salvation. They come for you, and they must find you as you were left, else you are lost.
"Frangine, Rule, we have to go." Neither would budge.
"Drumheller!"
Rule called.
"The Soul Eater! That's a demon!" "You think I don't know that?"
He shrieked in the sanctity of his own thoughts and said out loud,
"Get away, foulness! Leave me be!"
That I cannot do. Hide you may from those who search above, but only I can deliver you from those below.
The corridor changed around him, and he flinched to behold a horde of Daikini thundering towards him. There was time to make out the captain who'd imprisoned him, and the Princess Anakeri, and a much older man, so tall he had to stoop his head at every doorway. At his heel, unchained and obedient as any puppy, trotted a death dog. An eye blink later, they were on him, ghosts, passing in the night, with only the hound aware something was amiss.
Decide. There is not time to ask again.
He felt a sharp sting against his thigh, looked down to find Rule beside him.
"It is a Soul Eater, Drumheller!
For all our sakes, come away!
For all our sakes, Rule, I don't dare! He heard the brownie cry out as he plunged forward into the darkness. And then he found himself back in the cell.
So, Peck, the tall Daikini said with a smile, what do you have to say for yourself?
The man had ridden beside Anakeri on the esplanade, and Thorn assumed him to be the Mazan warlord, their castellan. He played innocent and confused. My lord, there's been some mistake. Suddenly he felt the sting of a leather glove across his cheek.
Wrong answer, Peck.
Leave him to me, my lord castellan,
began the captain. Thorn licked his lips, casting his eyes furtively toward the death dog. The hound bared its teeth in a hungry snarl. What's your name? The woman asked. Thorn Drumheller, lady. Tell us of Willow. I'm not sure what milady means. Willow Ufgood, slayer of the sorceress demon Queen Bavmorda, godfather and sworn protector of the sacred Princess Elora Danan, the Magus. Need I say more? With all you seem to know, great lady, what need have you of me? The warlord's stinging glove again.
Not a moment for wit, Peck.
We are charged, Anakeri said, and Thorn had a sudden flash of insight that she didn't much like Elora. With the defense of the realm and of the sacred princess. I'm no threat to either. This is a dangerous time. Never in history have the rulers of all the realms beyond gathered at a human table. Prophecy says the sacred princess is the salvation of the realms, the means by which they might find their way to true and lasting peace, which is why we will allow nothing to disrupt the ceremonies. Why have you come to Anguin? I thought only to offer service to the sacred Princess Elora as my people had in years past. The Magus spins a different tale of Nelwynds allied with the darkest of powers. Because of them, Tir Asleen is no more. That is no truth, lady. You call the Magus a liar? I know what I know.
Shall I order the implements of interrogation made ready, dread lord?
Asked the captain. We require answers, dolt, snapped Anakeri. Not a bloodbath.
I think, the warlord said, this circumstance requires Milady's special talents. Consider yourself dismissed, Captain, with our thanks for a job well done.
The captain scrambled up the stairs, anxious to be away. It was only after he was actually out the door that Thorn realized the death dog was gone as well. Let's get this done, Anakeri said. She had taken some jars from a carryall she'd brought with her and mixed various substances together. Now she dipped 3 fingers into the bowl and turned them clockwise. When she drew them out, sparkles of tiny stars fell from them in a glittery cascade. 2 fingers together, she drew a line across the center of Thorn's forehead, then another bisecting it from the crown of his head to his chin. Where the 2 lines came together, she drew the symbol of an open eye, a magical window to his soul. Next, she outlined his lips to prevent him from holding back any words. After that, the same to his ears, so he'd hear only her words, and to his nose, so she'd have mastery over his very breath. As she worked, each marking on his flesh was replicated on hers. They breathed as one. Their hearts beat as one. He didn't try to fight, partly because he wasn't sure he could. How are you called? The Mazan asked softly when she had finished. Thorn Drumheller, was the answer his lips shaped, but the words came from Anakeri's mouth. The questions were simple. Who was he? Where did he come from? Why was he here? He chose his answers with care from that deepest place within him where he still held dominion. They asked of the battle and of the companions he mourned. He let her feel his sense of loss without quite revealing the reasons for it, and was rewarded by a hitch in the smooth rhythm of their breaths, as his pain struck too sharp a resonance in her own memory. He used the break to shore up his own inner defenses without alerting her to the fact that he was actively and fiercely opposing her. He had no sense of the true passage of time, save in the lines of fatigue he saw etching themselves across the Princess Royal's face. His mask was tight across the face of his soul. Every answer had its element of truth, yet the totality was a lie. At long last, she wiped off the star stuff, breaking the link between them. "Well?" prompted the warlord. "A wanderer, no more than what he says he is." "Kill him, then." "It's too close to the ascension. I want no blood spilled. Leave the Nelwyn as he is, Modri, till after the ceremony." "That, Highness, would not be prudent." The warlord stepped forward fast as a striking cobra. Too late, Thorn saw him draw a handful of black crystalline sand from a pouch, watched it coalesce into a slim stiletto blade of gleaming obsidian. Then, with the faintest outrush of breath, he puffed it forward into Thorn's skull, stabbing right through the point where Anna Carey had drawn forth his third eye. As Thorn convulsed, gabbling like a death dog, Anna Carey shoved the man aside with force and fury. "Damn you, Modri! I gave you no such leave." "A good commander knows when to take the initiative, my pet." Of the stiletto there was no sign. The blade and all its malefic power had been absorbed into Thorn's flesh on contact. "Shall we go, Princess?" the Castellan said. "We've indulged ourselves enough for one evening." As she followed, Anna Carey blew on the fingertips of her right hand, then touched them to Thorn's lips, thereby passing on the ghost kiss. And Thorn was alone. This would go on, he knew, until he was pulp and stretched to the full extension between the realms of life and death. It was the same enchantment that had been used on Ferren, as too late he realized that Modri had been the sorcerer who'd transformed the boy into the leader of the great hunt. But where Thorn was concerned, the change spell would smash his body to rubble, as it would his soul, and rebuild both in the image of a beast, the intellect of a man, the power of a sorcerer, mated to the brute force of a death dog, all tightly leashed to the magus who had cast the spell. Everything in him that hurt, he transformed then into rage, and casted out his voice. Fire exploded from his breast, lighting him from within, as it followed the byways of his nervous system to the ends of his body. He fought as he had never fought before. He forged a sword from the substance of his soul, but with each swing his blade shone a fraction less brightly, and shadow hemmed him in from every side. The battle would have been soon over had not Anna Carey's farewell kiss cancelled much of her remaining enchantment.
"Trust me,"
he heard, and wished he was deaf. "You're a demon!" he shrieked in his mind.
"You won't die. They won't let you. They've caught you good and proper, and through you, the child. Can't save yourself, Peck. How are you to save her?"
He didn't have long. Even if he survived through some miracle, all that remained of him would be a shell. "Help me," he asked. "Please." In a twinkling, his insight expanded beyond its farthest boundaries. He was stone, every stone, from the core foundation to the highest roof point, and he beheld the dungeon where he lay, and every other room of the palace as well. Suddenly, he was looking at the brownies from a score of different directions, and hearing their voices, big as life. "Told you! Told you!" Frangine had worked himself into a state. They were both still in Alora's tower, and had taken refuge in the central tree of the garden there. "He's been eaten by a demon, and we are stuck." The brownie had it right and wrong. Thorn was as much the demon now as he was an eagle when insight allowed him to ride his soul with Anella's, and the experience was as much a wonder. Then his vision shifted, and Thorn saw Elora in her room, being tended by people who feared and disliked her. All were proud to have her in residence. None wanted the slightest thing to do with her. He opened his eyes, grateful at last for a purely physical sensation, and felt stone beneath his cheek. He was sore all over, but the aches were little more than what came after a poor night's sleep. He pushed himself up. "Who are you?" Thorn wondered aloud. "What are you?"
I am. How I came to be, I do not know. I have always been of this place.
I must go, Thorn said, but failed in his initial attempt to rise.
You cannot. There is a debt. Honor demands a settlement.
I was wondering when we'd get around to that. The darkness moved, and Thorn saw all his possessions before him, including his sword. You have been busy, he said to the demon as he buckled on his belt and pouches. There was no reply. When he looked up, a woman lay before him. She floated at waist height. She was tall and powerfully built, with broad shoulders, long arms and legs. Her hair was black as the darkness surrounding her and cropped close to the skull. Tribal tattoos on bicep and thigh, plus some scars. A nose that had been broken, set between wide-set eyes and high cheekbones. She had the upturned eyes and gold-touched skin of one who hailed from the spice lands, and the tone of her musculature spoke of a woman who earned her way with a sword. She didn't breathe, but she wasn't dead. There was a smudge on the center of her forehead, as he knew there was on his, where the crystal blade had been thrust home. Same fate, same fight, and in her way, she'd won. She'd preserved her soul and her humanity, though it had cost her every other aspect of herself. Who was she?
She fled from those who would enslave her.
What is it you want?
Freedom for my child.
No, he said. I cannot. I will not. That is an abomination.
Does not the one gift balance the other?
She had a life and being all her own. You had no right to steal it.
Both life and being are gone. Where then is the harm in using what remains?
Even if that were true, there's no way I'd be mad enough to loose a demon from its prison.
I offer you my greatest treasure, to shape and do with as you will. If there is a better way of living than we have ever known, teach it to my child.
I've never heard one of you talking so. Why should you care?
I had no regard for those of your kind about me until the youngling in the tower came. I was special to her. She called me friend. At first I answered because it amused me. Then she spun a spell of words and brought light where none had ever shone. It was more than I could bear. To my shame and sorrow, I fled from her. But having held the light, even if only for that moment, I cannot bear to keep my child in the dark.
I should have come sooner, Thorn breathed. Past his mind's eye cascaded a series of images of a child whose spirit was as radiant as her flame-blonde hair, cast into a land of strangers to become an object of veneration and fear, a talisman, not a needing, growing girl. Yet for all that, she made a garden of such peace that even night herons couldn't befoul it. And here was a demon speaking of hope, bargaining to give its offspring a better life. The faintest of gleams on the floor caught Thorn's eye, and he took up Anna Carey's silver hair clip. His insight saw the face of a blonde boy, Anna Carey's lost twin, and he knew that this had been a last gift on their shared birthday before their world shattered. The princess loved few things more, so how, he wondered, had it come to be left behind? Perhaps there's hope after all, he whispered.
Your answer, Thorn Drumheller.
If it's within my power, I'll save your child.